Their love was compared to a hurricane. It swept away everything in its path: marriages, careers, reputations. But behind the blinding glitter of diamonds, scandals, and million-dollar paychecks lay another truth. The truth about two lonely souls who could neither be together nor live apart. He called her a dwarf with a huge belly and, in the next breath, fell to his knees before her. She forgave his affairs, his drunken antics, his humiliations, but she couldn't let him go. They married twice, only to divorce again. What really bound Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton together? Madness, or a final attempt by two broken stars to save each other? Why couldn't Hollywood's greatest heartthrob forget her even after the divorce? Los Angeles, 1950, the golden age of Hollywood. Champagne flowed like water, laughter rang like crystal glasses, and stars shimmered not only in the sky, but among the guests at yet another lavish party. She sat in the corner, leaning back in her chair, as if watching a play she had no intention of joining. A brunette, dark hair, a cool gaze, a book in her hands, details that made her seem like a stranger at this celebration of life. Her sunglasses rested low on the tip of her nose, and that alone was enough to make Richard Burton, who had been laughing moments before in a circle of admirers, fall silent. He froze, as if he had hit an invisible wall. It was Elizabeth Taylor. She had long since learned to ignore admiring glances and whispers behind her back. Her world was encased in armor, strong as steel, cold as ice. And that evening she had no intention of letting anyone in. But he stood there, stunned, intoxicated by a single look from her, thinking only one thing: my God, she's magnificent. Years later, Burton would recall that moment with the same intensity. She looked straight at me. She was so beautiful I almost burst out laughing. She pulled you in like a black hole, and she didn't care. Didn't care about me at all. But in the 1950s, this was only the beginning. She had been born into the spotlight, the daughter of actors, a girl with double rows of eyelashes, as if fate itself had given her extra protection from the ordinary. Her violet eyes drove directors, admirers, and an endless parade of lovers mad. But fame is not only glamour, it is also loneliness under the gaze of thousands. And only those double lashes, like a curtain, could briefly shield her from a world that demanded she remain Elizabeth forever. A legend, not just a woman. Richard Jenkins, his real name, was born in a miserable shack where a family of 13 crowded into a few cramped meters. He was the second youngest. His mother, exhausted by hunger and relentless labor, died during childbirth with her last baby, and his father didn't even have the money for a coffin or a burial plot. In one interview, Burton recalled, "The 10 pounds we had to borrow for our mother's funeral hung over us for years. When we finally paid it off, it felt like a holiday. We lived in absolute poverty. There were years when we survived only on free soup from charities." Fate seemed to have prepared a life typical of that valley: coal mines, blackened hands, and early death. But one day, a school teacher named Philip Burton saw something more in the thin boy. He put books in his hands instead of coal. Shakespeare, Dickens, Byron. He taught him not just to read, but to feel. Not just to dream, but to desire. He even trained him out of his Welsh accent. Richard absorbed every word like a starving wolf cub. Later, he took his teacher's surname as his own, a talisman, a gesture of gratitude. In 1943, he confidently made his stage debut. But life is not a stage where the hero walks steadily toward glory. War caught up with him, as it did with everyone. The Royal Air Force, roaring engines instead of applause, the smell of gunpowder instead of makeup. In 1947, Burton was demobilized and began working in London theater and film. He both hated and worshipped the stage. He took any role, even the most vulgar ones, even those that made his heart tighten with shame. In the dark corners of dressing rooms, he drowned that shame in whiskey, then stepped back onto the stage the next morning, because he had no other choice. Critics sneered, "Burton is just a beautiful voice." They didn't know that behind every monologue stood dozens of mouths he had to feed. Family back in Wales, their outstretched hands, their silent reproach. In 1962, on the set of Cleopatra, Burton approached his co-star and unexpectedly whispered in her ear, "You're a little on the chubby side, darling, but your face is lovely." Stunned, Liz burst out laughing. Not long after, she confided to her makeup artist, "I think I'm falling in love with that arrogant man." Just recently, she had sworn she would be the one woman who wouldn't fall into Richard Burton's trap. Strangely, his acne-scarred face didn't stop women of all ages from being drawn to him. His broad shoulders, confidence, and raw masculinity made him seem like a true alpha. Even Coco Chanel once compared the gaze of his dreamy blue eyes to a kiss. Their affair ignited like wildfire right there on set. The director soon realized that Elizabeth and Richard were no longer simply exchanging lines. They had, in a sense, become Antony and Cleopatra themselves, madly in love. Two stars, both with temperaments capable of heating the air to a boil. Their divorces shocked Hollywood. Their wedding at the Ritz-Carlton, which they modestly called small, marked the beginning of a decade-long marathon of passion, scandal, and mutual destruction. At the peak of her fame, Elizabeth earned $1 million per film. Burton wasn't far behind. His fees ranged from $500,000 to $750,000 per picture. Once notoriously frugal, he transformed into a fantastically generous husband. Taylor recalled, "He gave me breathtaking gifts the whole world knew about, but he also gave me things quietly, without any reason at all, and asked me not to tell the press." He bought her a private jet for $960,000. She, in turn, never let him out of her sight. Writes biographer Kitty Kelly. She gifted him Van Goghs worth millions, ordered leather-bound libraries, drank with him until dawn in smoky bars. She became his shadow, his muse, his overseer. Burton, who had once taken every role for money, under her influence played Hamlet and King Henry. "She made me realize what rubbish I had been doing," he admitted. Every day, Elizabeth woke with the fear of losing him. Richard Burton, the center of her universe, her curse, her salvation. "I need him to be happy," she whispered, knowing that this dependence was burning them both alive. Their life shone like the diamond he gave her for her 40th birthday, but cracks had already formed. He drank to silence his Welsh melancholy. She drank to keep up. Dinner parties ended in shattered dishes. Film shoots collapsed under hangovers. Kitty Kelly writes, "Their fiercest fights were usually sparked by Burton's drinking or his affairs. The worst happened when Burton, forgetting his wife's name, introduced her under someone else's. I'm terrible with names," he later joked. "When I said, 'This is my wife, Phyllis,' she didn't speak to me for a month and kept asking who Phyllis was." He envied her fame, but soon there was nothing left to envy. Both sank. Films flopped, contracts vanished, and love turned into war. After 10 years, they divorced, but Burton wrote to her in tears, "Come back. You are the greatest actress. I love you." In 1974, when Elizabeth was in a clinic after surgery, Burton burst into her room and beat up her new lover. "Only a lawful husband belongs here," he shouted, then smiled and asked, "Hello, Beryl. How are your wounds?" A month later, they secretly remarried in the African wilderness. Burton swore to start over, but a flame that has burned the soul cannot burn forever. The second marriage lasted just 16 months. They tried to be air for each other, but became poison. Their story is not a romance, but a tragedy, where love and hate intertwined in a deadly dance. "I would live with him even in a hut," Elizabeth said, but their hut had long since burned down, leaving only ashes. Quietly, without press noise, she filed for divorce. She no longer believed promises. She was tired, her health was failing, and major roles no longer came her way. By her 40s, she had gained weight, but she no longer cared. "I've lived every second of my 45 years fully," she said. "I've never hidden my age. I'm proud of my life. I have nothing to hide, and I'm happy. I am satisfied, and I'm not going to starve myself because my body doesn't bother me." Her 7th marriage was to Senator John Warner. Burton couldn't resist mocking them publicly. "That marriage was doomed from the start," he told journalists. "I met Warner, and the first thing I noticed was that he was shorter than me. He pulled me aside and said, 'Well, I've got your Liz now. Admit it. You made a mistake letting her go.' What a ridiculous delusion." I told Elizabeth straight out she wouldn't last long with him, and I was right. She dreams of coming back to me. She begs me to marry her again, but I'm done playing those games. We're bound together for life anyway. She's my ex-wife, the mother of our children, a living legend, an erotic legend, a dark-haired dwarf with a huge belly and just as large a bust. I adore her. After her painful divorce from Warner, Elizabeth fell into despair. Life seemed meaningless. She barely ate, cried into her pillow at night, and constantly called doctors, convinced she was dying. But tests showed the same thing. Her body was healthy. Only her soul was ill. To become a legend, one must first die. But death didn't come for her. Instead, fate offered another act. She turned to charity work and theater. The public greeted her return coolly. Times had changed. Her glory belonged to the past. In moments of weakness, she found herself again in Burton's arms, or in fleeting romances, trying to escape loneliness. "All my life I've been lucky," she said. "I was given everything: beauty, fame, wealth, love, but happiness came at the cost of disasters, illness, and destruction." 1984, Switzerland. Burton was found dead. He had died of a stroke at 58. He was buried in a traditional Welsh red suit, a book of poetry placed in his hands. It is said that Elizabeth Taylor kept, until her final breath, a letter he had written to her shortly before his death. She broke, disappeared from public life. The world no longer mattered, only her grief. 1991, the Betty Ford Center. Among other lost souls, she slowly rediscovered the taste of life. Young patients laughed, joked, believed in the future. Among them was Larry Fortensky, a simple truck driver 20 years her junior. "We were drawn to each other," he later recalled. Once in Switzerland, she ran out into the snow in a nightgown and a fur coat, fell down laughing. I took a picture. I still have it. But that story ended, like everything in her life. What remained was the legend and the price she paid for happiness. Thank you for being part of this story. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.